I planned every detail of my mother-in-law's beachfront birthday, a grand celebration at a five-star Caribbean resort. The place was breathtaking, with white sand and turquoise waves. But the moment we checked in, everything shifted. The family received ocean view suites, while I was handed a key to a basement room near the staff quarters. My husband said nothing. His mother smiled and called it practical. I didn't argue. I walked to the elevator, calm and quiet, then turned back toward the lobby. I had built that booking myself, and I knew exactly how to make it disappear. The resort's marble floors gleamed beneath the sunlight, and laughter filled the lobby as the Whitmore family admired their suites. Maya stood aside, her keycard still warm in her hand. She wasn't angry yet, only stunned by how easily they dismissed her. After all the effort she put into this trip, they still treated her like a servant. The same calm she used to handle angry clients now shielded her pride. She watched the staff escort them away, then tightened her grip on her suitcase and made a quiet decision that would change everything. The elevator mirrored her reflection as she pressed the button for the basement. Her mind wasn't racing. It was clear, focused. She thought about how humiliation had become routine, how politeness had been her armor. The elevator descended, the light dimming with each floor. When the doors opened to a narrow hallway, smelling faintly of cleaning supplies, she stared at it for a long moment. Then she stepped back, pressed the button for the lobby again, and smiled to herself. She wasn't here to argue. She was here to end their illusion of control. Back in the lobby, the front desk staff looked surprised to see her return so soon. She didn't explain. Maya simply asked to speak with the general manager. Years of building her travel agency had given her the calm confidence of someone who knew how every system worked. She had made the resort what it was today through her clients, and her company's name carried weight. As she waited by the private office door, she knew she wasn't seeking revenge out of spite. It was about respect, something they'd never offered her willingly. Inside the manager's office, the air smelled faintly of sea breeze and polished wood. Maya greeted him by name, laying her contract folder neatly on his desk. He remembered her from past collaborations, always professional, never difficult. She explained the unauthorized room changes in measured tones, showing him where the Whitmore family had altered her original document. Her agency was the contracting party, not theirs. Her name held the guarantee. With a few calm sentences, she withdrew it. The manager leaned forward, realizing this wasn't a complaint. It was a controlled shutdown of an entire booking. Outside, the resort buzzed with the usual sound of suitcases rolling across tile, laughter echoing from the bar. Maya listened from the office doorway, quietly watching paradise operate as usual. But behind the scenes, she had just flipped a switch that would send quiet shockwaves through the system. Her calm expression didn't hint at what was unfolding. Somewhere upstairs, her mother-in-law was likely admiring her suite's view, unaware that the payment method guaranteeing it had just been voided. Maya checked her watch and gave the staff a polite nod. Everything was already in motion. The moment she stepped outside into the sunlight, the sting of humiliation began to fade. She walked toward the beach bar, ordered a drink, and watched the ocean stretch endlessly before her. There was a strange peace in knowing she had stopped pretending. For years, she had served others' comfort while sacrificing her own. Today, she had chosen differently. She didn't need to shout or prove anything. The resort's systems would speak for her soon enough. With each sip, she felt her confidence return, steady and unshakable, like the tide coming in. As she sat quietly, Maya reflected on how it had all started. She wasn't born into wealth or luxury. She built her life piece by piece. In the early days, she worked long hours in a small apartment above a laundromat, managing dream vacations for couples she could never afford to imitate. But she was good at it. Exceptionally good. Her patience and organization turned chaos into order. Clients trusted her completely. Over time, that reputation grew into a business that catered to the rich and powerful. Ironically, that same world would later underestimate her. Her travel agency became her life. Every booking mattered. Every client's problem was hers to solve. When disasters struck, missed flights, canceled weddings, lost luggage, she handled everything with composure. Her calm voice became her brand. She wasn't rich, but she had earned influence, and in the travel industry, that meant power. She learned who truly respected her and who only valued her usefulness. Among her clients were people who measured kindness by wealth. She adapted, studied them, and learned their language of status and control. That knowledge would now become her sharpest tool. Ethan had entered her story during one of those chaotic weeks when everything seemed to fall apart. His company's corporate retreat had collapsed due to last-minute venue issues, and his tone on the first phone call had been desperate. Maya fixed it within hours. He was impressed, then curious, then infatuated. The calls kept coming long after the retreat ended. He wasn't like the others, or so she believed. He asked about her work, her goals, her past. Their bond grew naturally, built on late-night problem-solving and shared exhaustion, or so she thought. Their relationship developed quickly, wrapped in admiration and long hours. Ethan spoke about respect, ambition, and how he valued her independence. Maya wanted to believe him. When he introduced her to his family, she prepared herself for polite curiosity, maybe distance, but not disdain. Vivian Whitmore's coastal mansion was spotless, decorated with money that didn't need to be discussed. At dinner, Vivian complimented her work with a tone that felt more like ownership than praise. Maya smiled through it, ignoring the quiet laughter exchanged between Ethan's siblings. She told herself it didn't matter. The Whitmores made her feel small, without saying a word. Vivian referred to her as the travel girl, as if that label explained her entire existence. The siblings treated her like part of the household staff. Maya noticed, but she stayed graceful. After all, Ethan seemed supportive, even proud. She convinced herself that his family's arrogance would fade with time. Love, she thought, could bridge anything. She didn't realize then that silence was its own betrayal. And every moment Ethan said nothing only taught them how easily she could be disrespected. Her wedding to Ethan was beautiful and simple, held on a beach she personally scouted. She planned every flower arrangement, every candlelit table. The Whitmores contributed financially, but Vivian made sure everyone knew it. Even on her wedding day, Maya sensed the power imbalance. Still, she believed she was marrying love, not legacy. Over the next few years, her agency became indispensable to the Whitmore family. Whenever a business partner needed a last-minute getaway or an investor wanted a luxury retreat, they called her. She made their chaos look effortless, and they liked that. It began as gratitude, but evolved into expectation. Vivian started claiming credit for Maya's ideas, boasting about her connections at luxury resorts. Ethan rarely corrected her, and over time, Maya stopped expecting him to. The siblings treated her like the family's event planner rather than a daughter-in-law. Still, she stayed silent. She thought professionalism and patience would eventually earn her place. Instead, it only made them comfortable exploiting her kindness. The more successful she became, the more they minimized it. She was their fixer, not their equal, and she felt it every day. The pattern hardened over the years. Vivian's polite cruelty came wrapped in compliments. Ethan's avoidance came disguised as calmness. Maya learned to read their gestures more than their words. They smiled at her in public, then ignored her in private. When travel plans failed, she was responsible. When things went perfectly, Vivian took the credit. It became an unspoken rule in the family dynamic. Yet despite it all, Maya stayed composed. She built a habit of quiet endurance, saving every ounce of strength for the day she'd finally stop tolerating them. When Vivian announced her 70th birthday celebration, she said it should be the kind of event people remember forever. Naturally, she insisted Maya plan it. Maya accepted, masking her resentment with a professional smile. The destination would be one of the most exclusive resorts in the Caribbean, one Maya had personally helped promote through her agency. Vivian wanted penthouse suites, private chefs, and fireworks over the sea. Maya handled every detail perfectly, knowing that one day her work would speak louder than their arrogance. She didn't yet realize that day was already approaching. As planning began, Maya noticed the old habits returning. Vivian would call multiple times a day, asking for little updates that quickly turned into long lists of demands. She wanted imported flowers, custom menus, and private yacht access. Every request, came with the same dismissive tone, as if Maya were just a staff member. Still, Maya kept her composure. She sent polished reports, managed invoices, and handled resort negotiations flawlessly. Behind her calm smile, she noted how often Vivian spoke about appearances, how this trip wasn't just a birthday but a public statement of wealth. Vivian became obsessed with guest details. She requested specific names, socialites, and real estate partners she hoped to impress. Each change meant more work, and Maya handled it all quietly. She even managed to secure upgrades at no extra charge, leveraging her long-standing partnership with the resort. Ethan barely thanked her. He treated it like routine, saying she was just doing what she does best. Maya pretended not to care. The truth was, she wanted acknowledgement, not for ego, but for the years she had given this family without ever being seen as one of them. As the event neared, Vivian's control grew sharper. She began editing Maya's itineraries, reordering room assignments, and moving key partners into top suites without asking. Maya kept records of every change, filing screenshots and contracts into a private folder. She sensed that something about this trip felt off. The tone of the family calls wasn't just excitement, it was tension disguised as celebration. Ethan avoided her eyes when she mentioned budgets. The Whitmores acted like people covering cracks with expensive wallpaper. Maya decided to observe, not confront, because knowledge was more powerful than reaction. One evening, while working late, Maya checked the resort's payment logs. Several transactions were pending approval, all from the Whitmore corporate account. When she emailed the resort finance team, they replied with concern about delays. It wasn't like Vivian to miss payments, at least not on something public. Maya asked Ethan about it casually, but he brushed it off, saying the accountants were handling it. She didn't push further, but something deep inside her knew that money was at the center of everything they tried to hide. She began paying closer attention to every detail. The next week, Maya borrowed Ethan's laptop to print client contracts. While organizing files, she stumbled across a folder labeled Caribbean Restructure. Her curiosity outweighed hesitation. Inside were documents revealing that the Whitmore real estate company was drowning in debt. Several resorts, including the one they were staying at, were part of an upcoming sale negotiation. The birthday celebration wasn't just a party, it was a business cover. They had invited potential buyers under the guise of family celebration. Maya leaned back, realizing she had unknowingly built the perfect stage for their financial illusion. Before continuing with her discovery, Maya thought of the people watching her story now, those who've ever stayed silent to keep peace. She wanted them to know silence has limits. If you've ever faced quiet disrespect, share where you're watching this from, and let your voice be heard. And if you believe that standing up doesn't always mean shouting, subscribe for more stories like this one. Maya's turning point began not when she spoke, but when she decided she no longer owed her silence to anyone. That's when everything started to shift in her favor. Maya scrolled deeper through the files, seeing documents marked confidential investor strategy. There were emails between Ethan and his siblings discussing cash flow issues, delayed projects, and risk of default. Then came the shock. Vivian's name on a memo, outlining plans to use the birthday event to restore investor confidence. Maya realized that the family's empire was crumbling, and she was unknowingly helping them mask it. Her entire career's reputation was tied to their facade. If this trip collapsed publicly, her agency could suffer too. It wasn't anger that filled her now. It was clarity. Later that night, Maya noticed Ethan's phone buzzing with messages from an unknown number. The name Julia appeared on the screen, followed by photos of tropical resorts and a laughing emoji. She hesitated before opening the conversation. Julia was Ethan's ex, a well-known influencer. The messages weren't innocent. They spoke about Vivian's big show before everything falls apart, and how Ethan should keep his head up when the storm hits. Maya stared at the screen, realizing she wasn't just an outsider to the family. She was an outsider to her own marriage. She didn't confront Ethan. Instead, she began gathering everything quietly. Copies of emails, screenshots, invoices, all organized and stored safely. Her years of handling crises for clients had trained her well. This time, she was her own client. She didn't plan revenge. She planned protection. Maya knew emotional reactions were what the Whitmores expected. They thrived on control. But she would take that control back, calmly, methodically. She looked at the calendar and saw that Vivian's birthday was just 3 weeks away. The timing was perfect for both the celebration and the reckoning to come. As preparations intensified, Vivian's tone shifted from demanding to dismissive. She stopped saying, "Thank you altogether." Every update from Maya was met with criticism. She nitpicked over colors, lighting, and even napkin folds. Maya smiled through it, her calm hiding the quiet countdown in her mind. She could see the end of this game. Each insult no longer hurt. It confirmed what she already knew. The family that once relied on her expertise had mistaken her patience for weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The stage was nearly set. Days before departure, Maya received the final rooming list. Vivian had altered it completely. Business guests were now in premium suites, family members in penthouses, and Maya herself assigned to a garden-level room. It was the lowest category available, one usually reserved for staff accommodations. She stared at the list for a long time, realizing Vivian had done it deliberately. There was no mistake. Every choice carried intent. Maya didn't react outwardly. She approved the list with a polite note, knowing she'd handle the correction in her own way once they reached the island. When the day of travel arrived, the Whitmores acted as if everything were perfect. They boarded the private jet with champagne and laughter. Maya sat near the back, laptop open, finalizing resort logistics. Vivian gave a little speech about family loyalty and gratitude. Ethan smiled, but didn't meet Maya's eyes. The irony was unbearable. They spoke of family while erasing her from it. She gazed out the window at the blue horizon below, her reflection barely visible. The trip that was meant to honor Vivian would soon become the one she'd never forget for all the wrong reasons. When the jet landed, resort staff greeted them with garlands, cold towels, and sparkling drinks. A large banner read, "Welcome, Whitmore family." Maya noticed the general manager's polite confusion when he glanced at the guest list. He recognized her but didn't question it publicly. Everyone smiled for photos, pretending the day was special. Vivian led the group, radiating importance, while Maya followed quietly at the back. She could sense the arrogance in every step they took across that marble lobby. None of them realized that the foundation beneath their luxury vacation was already cracking. At check-in, the front desk staff handed out keys in golden envelopes. Each family member received a room number on the top floor, with panoramic ocean views. When Maya's turn came, the clerk hesitated before sliding a plain card across the counter. Her assigned room was near the service elevators, facing the parking lot. Vivian smiled pleasantly, saying something about keeping Maya close to operations. Ethan mumbled something vague about practicality. Maya said nothing. Her silence wasn't submission, it was calculation. Every move they made was adding fuel to the moment she'd take everything back. Maya walked to the elevator, the keycard still in her hand. The family's laughter echoed behind her as they headed toward their suites. She pressed the button for the basement and waited. The mirrored walls reflected her calm face. Not broken, but sharpened. Years of endurance had taught her that revenge didn't need fire. It only needed precision. When the doors opened at the dim hallway, she didn't step out. She pressed the button again, returning to the lobby. If they thought she was there to serve them, they were about to learn otherwise. She walked straight to the general manager's office. The staff greeted her with familiarity. Surprised to see her alone, she explained the situation briefly, showing him the booking documents and agency agreement. He understood immediately. Maya's company wasn't just a third-party organizer. It was the official contractor for the entire Whitmore event. That meant the financial responsibility legally rested with her agency, not the family. She informed him she was withdrawing her guarantee for unpaid balances. The manager nodded, already sensing what it meant for the Whitmores. Maya's calmness made it all the more powerful. Together, they reviewed the system. The resort's internal dashboard showed dozens of pending transactions linked to the Whitmore Group. Maya's signature authorized them all. One by one, she marked the unpaid items as void. The system instantly flagged the rooms for review. Any upgrades linked to her agency were removed. The general manager thanked her for the clarity, knowing this wasn't revenge. It was business. Maya requested a standard notice be sent to the family's registered email addresses, explaining that the payment method required reauthorization. She didn't smile, but inside, something steady shifted. While the Whitmores toasted champagne in their penthouse, Maya sat at the beach bar, watching the waves hit the shore. She could hear faint music from the pool area, laughter floating in the air. The sun began to set, painting the sky gold and coral. Her drink sat untouched. She wasn't celebrating yet. She was waiting for the system to catch up, for the reality they'd built on her silence to crumble. Her power came not from anger but from knowledge, and tonight knowledge would be their undoing. The sea breeze carried quiet satisfaction. Inside the resort, staff began receiving automatic alerts. The Whitmore booking had been partially suspended pending new authorization. Standard policy required contacting the lead guest. The front desk agents whispered among themselves, unsure how to approach such an influential family. The manager assured them everything was being handled professionally. Meanwhile, Maya remained seated at the bar, appearing relaxed to anyone watching. In truth, she was timing everything carefully. She knew the Whitmores' tendency to react with arrogance first and reason later. That would make their public embarrassment even more effective. 30 minutes later, the first call went out to the Whitmore suite. A polite message informed them that there was an issue with their corporate card. The front desk apologized for the inconvenience and requested updated payment. At first, the response was dismissive. Vivian sent her assistant to check what was wrong. Ethan assured everyone it was a minor glitch. But when the second and third calls came, confusion spread. The staff, bound by policy, held firm. From her seat at the bar, Maya watched the first ripples of panic begin. Upstairs, the siblings argued over the phone while the resort manager maintained polite professionalism. Their attempts to reauthorize payment failed. The corporate card on file had exceeded its limit. The front desk gently explained that the agency's financial guarantee had been withdrawn. When they asked who authorized that change, the answer was simple. Maya Thompson, director of Horizon Lux Travel. Vivian's name turned pale on the manager's report. The siblings looked at each other in disbelief. Downstairs, Maya paid her bar tab and slowly turned toward the lobby, her timing perfect. The Whitmores arrived at the front desk, dressed impeccably but visibly rattled. Guests began to notice the tension. The manager maintained composure, explaining that without an updated payment method, the system would begin releasing unpaid rooms to waiting guests. Vivian insisted there must be a mistake, but the records were clear. Ethan tried calling their accountant, who didn't answer. Their business partners, already suspicious of financial rumors, exchanged quiet glances nearby. Maya entered the scene, her calm presence cutting through the noise like a steady current. She stood near the bar, watching quietly. Vivian demanded to see Maya, assuming she would fix the issue as always. The irony of her own words almost made Maya smile. She stepped forward from her place by the bar, holding her drink, the picture of composure. She explained, in clear, simple terms, that her agency could no longer guarantee the Whitmore accounts due to unauthorized contract changes. There was no anger in her voice, only certainty. The staff listened carefully, respecting her authority. The family stared at her, speechless, realizing she wasn't their fixer anymore. She was the one holding every card. Vivian's charm fractured under the weight of realization. The siblings whispered nervously, calculating the damage. Ethan's face tightened, his silence now resembling guilt more than shock. The staff maintained professional neutrality while quietly reallocating rooms. The penthouses, once reserved for the Whitmores, were being reassigned to other VIP guests. Word spread quickly through the resort. Maya's quiet defiance had turned into public consequence. Vivian tried appealing to pride, but every plea sounded weaker. The woman who once looked down on Maya now stood powerless before the system Maya herself had built. As the situation unraveled, Maya remained calm, never raising her voice. She simply explained facts when asked. Her tone steady. The resort upheld its policies without exception. Vivian finally realized that no amount of entitlement could override contracts and payment systems. The family's humiliation was complete, witnessed by guests and staff alike. Maya didn't linger for their excuses. She thanked the manager politely, stepped outside into the warm Caribbean night, and smiled at the sound of distant waves. What had started as their celebration had become her quiet liberation. After the chaos in the lobby, Maya walked down the boardwalk, leading toward the beach. The sound of waves replaced the noise of arguments behind her. She didn't need to see their faces to know what was happening. The Whitmores, who once prided themselves on grace, were now scrambling to fix their own mess. Guests whispered. Employees exchanged knowing glances. Maya had spent years being invisible to them, and now every eye was on her, though not with pity, only respect. She had done nothing cruel, yet justice had unfolded in its most elegant form. The next morning, the resort felt different. The Whitmore suites were quiet, curtains drawn, phones unanswered. The breakfast table that had been reserved for them sat empty. Maya enjoyed her coffee by the beach, the calm of the ocean matching her mood. She saw hotel staff exchanging polite smiles with her, but sensed their curiosity. News had traveled fast. Everyone knew what happened. For the first time, she didn't care about controlling the story. She had no need to defend her actions. Truth didn't need explanation. It had already spoken for her. Later that afternoon, she met the general manager once more to finalize paperwork. The resort had begun reassigning rooms and updating contracts. Maya signed the last few forms confirming that her agency was released from all financial obligations. Her professionalism impressed everyone. She didn't mention the Whitmore's behavior or her personal ties. It wasn't necessary. The manager thanked her for years of partnership and offered support if she ever needed it. She walked out of the office feeling lighter, like the weight of 5 years had quietly lifted off her shoulders without a single confrontation. Upstairs, Vivian tried to salvage what she could. Her carefully curated event schedule began falling apart. Without guaranteed payments, several suppliers withdrew. The resort staff downgraded suites that were no longer prepaid. Maya had warned them countless times about proper coordination, and now her absence showed how much they had relied on her. Vivian's frustration grew as she realized that the only person who could fix the problem had already walked away. Pride had always been her armor, but now that armor had turned to glass, and everyone could see the cracks. Ethan tried calling Maya several times, but she didn't answer. She knew what he'd say. A mixture of apology and defense. It no longer mattered. Her silence was stronger than any response she could give. Back in her room, she packed her things and booked a return flight, using her agency's private portal. She wasn't running away. She was choosing to leave on her own terms. As she zipped her suitcase, she looked around the modest hotel room she'd requested after canceling the basement one. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers, and that was enough. By the second day, the Whitmores' problems deepened. Their corporate account remained frozen, and their event planner canceled the birthday gala due to unpaid deposits. Vivian's perfect celebration turned into a quiet dinner with limited staff. Some guests discreetly left the resort after hearing whispers of financial complications. The family's reputation began unraveling faster than any of them expected. Ethan tried to manage the situation, but the more he spoke, the clearer it became that he no longer had control. Maya's calm exit had left behind a silence they couldn't fill with excuses. When Maya landed back in Miami, her phone was filled with missed calls. Ethan, his siblings, and even Vivian's assistant had tried to reach her. She deleted the messages without listening. Her focus was elsewhere. At her office, her team greeted her with confusion, not yet aware of what happened. Maya gathered them in the meeting room and explained that the Whitmore partnership was officially terminated. She didn't mention revenge or humiliation, just facts. She told them their agency's new goal was simple: only work with clients who respect their partners, not exploit them. That night, she sat in her apartment surrounded by paperwork, reviewing every document related to the Whitmores. Her eyes lingered on the evidence she'd collected: emails, payment delays, the restructure plan. It all told the same story: a powerful family collapsing under their own arrogance. She forwarded the files to her lawyer, attaching a simple note about protecting her business and reputation. She wasn't seeking compensation, she was drawing boundaries. For the first time in years, she was no longer connected to them, not legally, not financially, and most importantly, not emotionally. Days later, she met her attorney to discuss next steps. The lawyer, experienced in corporate disputes, immediately understood the situation. He advised her to document the emotional and professional manipulation she had endured during her marriage. Maya provided everything, from altered contracts to personal messages showing neglect. Together, they built a case that would protect her in every possible way. She didn't want to destroy Ethan, just free herself completely. The attorney admired her restraint, noting that most people would seek vengeance. Maya smiled faintly and said she didn't need revenge. She already had closure. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, the Whitmores faced growing scrutiny. Rumors spread among investors about unpaid bills and canceled events. Photos leaked online, showing resort staff escorting guests to different rooms, while the Whitmore family stood at the front desk. The once revered name now carried whispers of scandal. Vivian retreated from public view, citing health reasons. Ethan returned home quietly, avoiding attention. Their empire was trembling, and Maya's silence only amplified it. Sometimes, she thought, the absence of defense speaks louder than any public statement ever could. She simply continued moving forward. Weeks passed, and Maya noticed how differently she breathed now. Her days began without tension, her nights without worry. She focused on her business, expanding into new markets. Clients noticed her renewed energy and commitment. They admired her professionalism, unaware of the storm she had endured privately. Behind every calm phone call was a woman who had survived being underestimated. Each new project she signed felt like another small victory. She no longer measured success by luxury or approval, but by peace. Freedom had become her most valuable currency, and she wasn't trading it again. One afternoon, while updating her website, Maya received an email from a journalist requesting comment about the Whitmore incident. Someone at the resort had leaked the story, describing her as the planner who turned the tables. She read the message twice, then closed it. She didn't want publicity. Her satisfaction came from knowing she'd acted with dignity. Let the world interpret it how they wanted. She had nothing to prove. She archived the email, logged off, and went for a walk along the waterfront, her phone left behind for the first time in years. Ethan eventually sent one final message. It wasn't an apology. It was confusion disguised as remorse. He said he missed her and wished she'd handled things privately. Maya didn't respond. She had learned that people who ignore your worth in private don't deserve explanations in public. The version of herself that once sought approval from him no longer existed. She deleted the message, emptied the trash folder, and exhaled deeply. Every piece of her past with him was now just data erased from memory and cloud storage alike. That felt cleaner than any closure. Her attorney finalized the divorce paperwork within weeks. The Whitmores tried delaying the process, but Maya's documentation left no room for argument. Every transaction, every instance of financial manipulation was recorded. She walked out of that meeting with a finalized settlement that favored her independence. Ethan didn't contest it. He couldn't. His silence now served her, just as hers once served him. As she signed the last page, she realized that peace doesn't always come from forgiveness. It often comes from simply refusing to keep fighting battles that no longer matter. With the legal matters behind her, Maya began rebranding her company. She changed the name, updated the logo, and created a fresh mission statement centered around integrity. Clients noticed. Referrals increased. Other travel professionals reached out, inspired by her story. She never confirmed or denied the rumors, but her calm confidence made people curious. The narrative others built around her only amplified her influence. Ironically, the scandal meant to humiliate her had transformed her career. Without planning it, she had become a symbol of quiet strength in an industry full of noise. In the months that followed, she moved to a new apartment overlooking Biscayne Bay. It was smaller than her old place, but full of light. Every morning, she made coffee and watched boats drift by, feeling grounded again. Her routine was simple: work, travel, rest, repeat. She no longer felt the pressure to prove herself. The Whitmores still appeared occasionally in headlines, legal disputes, investor withdrawals, but she never read past the titles. The woman she used to be would have cared deeply. The woman she'd become simply turned the page and carried on. One evening, she received a handwritten note from the resort manager. It thanked her for her professionalism during the unfortunate situation and expressed admiration for how she handled it with grace. Enclosed was a photo taken from the resort's balcony, the same view the Whitmores had once flaunted. It showed the sea at sunset, warm and endless. Maya placed it on her desk as a reminder, not of revenge, but of freedom. That image became her quiet proof that sometimes walking away doesn't mean defeat. It means reclaiming the right to stand on higher ground. Her agency flourished. High-profile clients came seeking her expertise, not just in travel planning but in crisis management. She built partnerships with ethical companies and personally reviewed each contract. Maya made sure her staff knew her golden rule: never work with anyone who treats others as lesser. It became their company motto, printed on every brochure. Her business grew slowly but steadily, built on trust instead of flattery. Each success felt earned, each setback manageable. She finally understood that true stability doesn't come from money. It comes from knowing where your boundaries begin and end. Months later, she attended a luxury travel summit in New York. The industry's most powerful names filled the room. Conversations buzzed about mergers, partnerships, and branding. Maya stood quietly at the back, observing. To her surprise, several attendees approached her, mentioning how her name had become synonymous with professionalism and courage. She accepted their compliments with humility, remembering how often she once sat in silence during similar events. Now, silence worked for her. It spoke of discipline, resilience, and quiet intelligence. She didn't need to tell her story. Her presence was enough. That night, in her hotel room overlooking the city skyline, Maya wrote a personal note in her journal. She didn't write about revenge or pain. She wrote about lessons, how power isn't taken, it's reclaimed. She reflected on the years she'd spent making others comfortable while erasing herself in the process. She thought about that basement room, the symbolic place where everything changed. It wasn't humiliation that defined it anymore. It was rebirth. What they meant to break her with had instead awakened the version of herself she'd almost forgotten existed. Ethan's name still appeared occasionally in the news, mostly tied to financial controversies. Each time she felt nothing, no bitterness, no satisfaction, just detachment. She had learned that some people live trapped by their need to control others, while freedom belongs to those who stop seeking approval. Maya's world had grown smaller, but brighter. Her clients respected her. Her team admired her, and she respected herself again. That quiet self-trust became her anchor. Even on hard days, she knew she would never fall back into old patterns of silence. Vivian's empire continued to crumble. Properties sold at fractions of their value, and public appearances ceased entirely. Former partners whispered about betrayal and mismanagement. Maya heard pieces of it from industry contacts, but didn't engage. She understood something most didn't. Vivian's downfall wasn't financial, it was emotional. The same pride that made her powerful also destroyed her. Maya didn't celebrate it. She simply acknowledged it as the natural result of cruelty disguised as class. Some lessons, she thought, can only be learned when everything finally collapses around the person who caused the pain. For Maya, the future felt open again. She began exploring new destinations, testing luxury resorts for clients, but also for herself. Traveling alone no longer felt lonely. It felt free. On each trip, she allowed herself one moment of reflection, standing by a window, breathing in new air, remembering where she started. Every flight, every check-in, every ocean view reminded her how far she'd come from that day in the Caribbean. She had turned her own story into a map, one that always pointed towards self-respect. She followed it without hesitation. At night, when her work was done, Maya sometimes replayed the memory of that day, the glimmering lobby, the family's laughter, the sound of her own quiet footsteps back to the manager's office. It no longer hurt to remember. Instead, it brought calm. That was the moment she chose herself over acceptance, truth over comfort. She didn't need forgiveness, and she didn't need closure from anyone else. She had given herself both. The memory became a reminder that dignity isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and unbreakable when you stop letting others define your worth. Her story had come full circle, yet it was only the beginning of another. Maya no longer lived for recognition or approval. She lived for balance, for the satisfaction of doing her work with purpose. The woman who once stood in a basement hallway, feeling invisible, now stood in the light of her own making. She had built herself twice, once through ambition and again through courage. And this time, no one could take it from her. The lesson was simple. When you stop chasing validation, you finally see how much power was yours all along. A year after the incident, Maya's life had transformed completely. Her agency had doubled in size, her client list filled with respectful professionals, and her sense of peace was stronger than ever. She still received the occasional inquiry about the Whitmore family, but she never entertained them. The story had faded from public gossip, but for Maya, it remained a quiet milestone. It wasn't about what she had done to them. It was about what she had reclaimed for herself. Every success since then was built on the foundation of that single, steady decision. Her mornings began with the sound of seagulls outside her window. She had moved to a coastal apartment overlooking the Atlantic, drawn by the rhythm of the ocean that once symbolized pain. Now, it represented clarity. Maya's routine was peaceful: coffee, emails, client calls, and quiet gratitude. Sometimes, as she watched the water, she remembered that first moment at the Caribbean resort, the sting of humiliation, the calm that followed, and the silent strength that carried her through. It was strange how the worst day of her life had become the source of her greatest growth. As her reputation grew, she began mentoring young professionals in the travel industry. Many came to her seeking advice on how to handle difficult clients or unfair treatment. She shared her story in pieces, never revealing names, only lessons. She told them to always keep records, to protect their work, and to never confuse politeness with submission. Her calm tone carried weight because it came from experience, not theory. Each mentee left her office standing a little taller. In helping others rebuild confidence, Maya found another layer of healing for herself. One of her proudest moments came when she signed a partnership with an international travel brand. The company valued her agency's ethics and integrity, praising her transparent practices. During the announcement dinner, she sat at the head of the table, surrounded by people who respected her for her professionalism, not her connections. As the CEO gave a toast in her honor, Maya smiled, thinking how different this applause felt. It wasn't borrowed status. It was earned recognition. The woman who once had to fight for a seat at someone else's table now owned her own. Around that same time, she received an anonymous envelope at her office. Inside was a short letter and a photo of Vivian. The handwriting was familiar. It belonged to Ethan. The letter said that Vivian's health had declined and that she often asked about Maya, wondering if she ever regretted what happened. Maya folded the paper and placed it in her drawer without reply. She didn't feel hate, only distance. Some chapters don't need revenge or reconciliation. They simply need to end. Maya had no space in her new life for ghosts from the old one. That night, she sat on her balcony with a glass of wine, the letter still sealed away in her desk. She watched the moonlight shimmer across the waves and thought about what regret really meant. She didn't regret her actions, but she regretted the years she'd spent waiting for validation. The real loss had been the time she wasted trying to be accepted by people who never saw her, but she forgave herself for it. Everyone learns strength through mistakes. That understanding felt softer than victory, more like peace finding its rightful place. Maya began writing notes to herself, reminders of lessons learned. She kept them in a small notebook, tucked beside her work planner. Each page contained a truth she had earned the hard way. Silence isn't weakness. Respect isn't owed. Peace has to be chosen. The last note she wrote was simple. I deserve rooms with windows. It wasn't literal anymore. It was symbolic. She had once been placed underground, near service halls, treated as less. Now every decision she made came from a place that faced the light. That notebook became her private promise. As her story circulated quietly in industry circles, she began receiving invitations to speak at leadership seminars. She declined the first few but eventually accepted one in Los Angeles. On stage, under warm lights, she spoke not about betrayal but about resilience. She shared how professionalism could coexist with boundaries and how calmness could be power. The audience listened, not because her story was dramatic, but because it was relatable. When the session ended, several attendees stayed behind just to thank her. Maya realized her experience had turned into something larger than herself. On her flight home, Maya sat by the window, staring at clouds stretching endlessly across the sky. The hum of the engines felt soothing. She thought about all the flights she'd booked for other people over the years: weddings, honeymoons, corporate retreats, all moments of someone else's story. Now, she finally felt like the traveler in her own. Every destination she reached was her choice, not someone's approval. She had turned her career into something meaningful, not because it was glamorous, but because it was honest. That thought made her smile as the plane began to descend. When she landed back in Florida, a gentle rain began to fall. The streets shimmered under streetlights, and the air smelled clean. She walked through the arrivals hall, luggage in hand, unnoticed and content. She didn't need grand endings or recognition. Life had become quieter, steadier, and deeply fulfilling. Her success wasn't loud anymore. It was steady, grounded in the quiet dignity of knowing who she was. Sometimes the smallest moments, like walking through rain without rushing, felt like the greatest reward for surviving years of silent endurance. She was finally living, not just managing. Months later, she visited the same Caribbean island again, this time for a new client's wedding. The resort had changed slightly: new management, updated decor, but the ocean looked the same. When she checked in, the staff greeted her warmly. Remembering her name, they offered her one of the top suites overlooking the beach. She accepted with a calm smile. As she entered the room, sunlight filled every corner. She stood by the balcony, watching the sea, and thought of the basement room she never stayed in. That memory no longer hurt. It reminded her of her strength. During the wedding weekend, she watched her new clients laugh with their families. The joy felt genuine, free of hierarchy or pretense. She admired it quietly, realizing that this was what celebration should look like: people valuing each other equally. She handled every detail flawlessly, ensuring their happiness. The bride hugged her after the ceremony, thanking her for making everything perfect. Maya smiled, not because of the praise, but because she saw herself reflected in that gratitude, a woman who gave her best and was finally appreciated for it. It felt like healing had come full circle. That evening, she sat on the beach after everyone left, the tide reaching just close enough to touch her feet. The moon was bright, the sound of laughter fading into music from distant bars. She felt the gentle pull of nostalgia, but not sadness. Her journey had been difficult, but it had led her here to freedom, peace, and confidence. The world was vast, and she was no longer confined to anyone's definition of worth. The ocean, once a backdrop to humiliation, was now a mirror reflecting the woman she had become. Back home, her company continued to thrive. Her small team expanded, and new opportunities appeared. She partnered with eco-resorts, community-based projects, and small businesses that valued fairness. Each contract she signed carried her personal ethics. Clients trusted her word completely. The success didn't surprise her anymore. It felt natural. For once, her achievements didn't require anyone else's permission. Her world no longer revolved around proving herself to people who didn't care. It revolved around building a life that felt honest, balanced, and self-defined. The simplicity of that realization filled her with quiet joy. Ethan reached out once more through a mutual contact. He had lost much of his business, and Vivian had retired completely. The message said he wanted closure. Maya politely declined through her assistant. There was nothing left to resolve. Closure wasn't something he could give her. It was something she had already created. For years, she had mistaken endurance for love, compromise for peace. Now she knew the difference. She wished him no harm, but she also wished him no access. Some doors aren't closed out of anger. They're closed to preserve the silence inside. After that, her thoughts about the Whitmores grew faint, fading like old postcards left in sunlight. She no longer checked their names online, no longer wondered what they thought of her. The past existed only as a series of lessons. Whenever she caught herself drifting toward old memories, she redirected her focus to the present. Her business, her staff, her clients. These were her new foundations. Her past had taught her resilience, but her present was teaching her gratitude. Peace, she realized, wasn't found in forgetting, but in living without bitterness. One morning, she received a call from a luxury travel magazine, inviting her to be featured in an issue about women redefining success. She accepted cautiously, unsure how much of her story to reveal. During the interview, she focused on her philosophy of empowerment rather than her personal history. When the article was published, the headline read, "The Woman Who Walked Out of the Basement and Built an Empire." She laughed when she saw it. It was dramatic, but true in spirit. The basement had become a symbol, not of shame, but of rebirth. Messages flooded her inbox from people who resonated with the article. Strangers shared stories of being undervalued at work, overlooked in relationships, or dismissed for their background. Maya read every message, feeling a deep connection to them. She replied to a few, encouraging them to keep their dignity intact, no matter what others took away. It felt humbling to realize how many people lived in their own basement rooms, waiting to find courage. She couldn't fix their lives, but she could remind them that strength doesn't start loud, it starts quietly, with one decision. As her influence grew, she was invited to collaborate on a mentorship program for women entrepreneurs. She accepted eagerly, determined to use her story for something meaningful. The program became a safe space where others could share their experiences of exclusion and rebuild their confidence. Maya's leadership wasn't about commanding attention, it was about listening, guiding, and reminding others of their value. Every success story from her students felt like another piece of her own healing. Empowerment, she discovered, multiplies when shared, and that realization gave her purpose beyond her business. Years later, she received an invitation to attend an awards ceremony, recognizing innovators in the travel industry. She didn't expect to win, but decided to go anyway. When her name was announced as Businesswoman of the Year, she froze for a second before walking on stage. The applause felt warm, not overwhelming. Standing under the lights, she thought of every version of herself that had led to this moment. The one who endured silence, the one who chose action, and the one who finally found peace. It wasn't victory, it was validation through grace. That night, she placed the award on her shelf beside the framed sunset photo from the resort. The two symbols, one of pain, one of progress, stood side by side. Together, they told her story better than any words could. She didn't dwell on the past, but she never erased it either. Pain, she understood, becomes wisdom when you carry it with honesty. The key was not letting it turn into bitterness. That balance was her greatest achievement. Every time she saw the award, she remembered the strength that came from staying calm in chaos. Her life settled into rhythm again, steady, calm, and fulfilled. She still traveled often, but now for herself as much as for clients. Each destination offered something new, yet she always carried her lessons with her. She no longer feared losing control, because she trusted herself to rebuild from anything. Freedom wasn't about perfection, it was about self-trust. On flights, she sometimes smiled at strangers who reminded her of who she once was: quiet, hardworking, underestimated. She hoped they too would someday learn that silence can be the sound of quiet strength, not surrender. When asked in interviews about her motivation, Maya always answered simply, dignity. Not revenge, not competition, just the quiet desire to live with dignity. That word had guided her through everything. Dignity when they mocked her, dignity when she walked away, and dignity when she succeeded without gloating. It had become her moral compass, one she refused to compromise again. In a world obsessed with noise and validation, she stood for calmness and principle, and somehow that made her voice louder than any argument she could ever have had. She returned to the Caribbean one last time, not for business, but for rest. She chose a secluded resort on a nearby island, smaller but serene. Walking barefoot on the sand, she watched the waves roll in and thought about everything that began here. The island no longer felt like the place of humiliation, it felt like closure. The air smelled the same, the sea looked the same, but she was entirely different. Standing there, she realized that forgiveness didn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it meant letting memories stay where they belonged. As the sun dipped into the horizon, Maya took a deep breath and smiled softly. She had built a new life from the ruins of disrespect, not by fighting louder, but by standing taller. Her story wasn't about revenge. It was about self-worth rediscovered. The ocean before her shimmered like a mirror, reflecting not her past, but her peace. The same woman who once stood in a dim basement hallway now stood beneath open sky, her heart unburdened. This was her true victory, the freedom to exist on her own terms, in her own light. After returning from the island, Maya noticed something shifting inside her. She no longer needed to look back for strength. The past had done its job. It had shaped her but no longer defined her. She began investing in new ventures, helping small boutique hotels grow their presence through ethical tourism. She didn't chase expansion for numbers, but for meaning. Each project felt like planting something that would last. The woman who once fought to prove herself now used her voice to uplift others. That quiet evolution became her true form of legacy. Her staff admired her leadership. She wasn't the kind of boss who shouted or micromanaged. Instead, she led by calm example. When problems arose, she asked questions, not accusations. That patience, once mistaken for weakness, became her greatest strength. Clients noticed too. They described her company as the most peaceful part of any trip. Behind the calm exterior was someone who had learned everything through pain, but refused to pass that pain onward. Her business model became a reflection of her personal philosophy. Grace can lead just as effectively as power. One morning, Maya received a postcard in the mail. It was from one of her trainees who had started her own travel consultancy. The note thanked Maya for inspiring her to walk away from an abusive employer and begin again. Maya placed the postcard on her office wall beside others like it. That wall had become her collection of victories, not trophies, but lives she had helped redirect. Each card was a reminder that her story didn't just free her, it helped others realize they deserved better too. That was more rewarding than any award. A few months later, she was invited to host a television feature about ethical travel. The producers admired her authenticity and wanted her insight. At first, she hesitated. She had never liked attention, but she accepted, realizing her words could reach people who needed them. During filming, she stood confidently before cameras, discussing fairness, cultural respect, and equality. The crew admired her calm energy, saying her presence made the set feel balanced. When the episode aired, messages poured in from viewers saying her story gave them courage to start fresh. It felt deeply fulfilling. In quiet moments, Maya still reflected on how everything changed because of one choice, the moment she turned around in that resort elevator. She sometimes wondered what might have happened if she had simply accepted the basement room, smiled politely, and endured it. That version of her life no longer felt imaginable. The small act of walking back to the lobby had altered her entire future. It reminded her that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it looks like a calm step forward when everyone expects silence. That single decision had rewritten everything. Her circle of friends had changed completely too. She no longer surrounded herself with people drawn to power or prestige. Instead, she built connections with those who valued honesty and kindness. They shared dinners filled with laughter, long walks by the sea, and honest conversations about life. There was no competition, no pretense, just presence. Maya realized that real companionship isn't about shared success, it's about shared peace. For the first time, she felt truly understood. The emptiness once filled with forced politeness had been replaced with genuine belonging. That was her quiet reward. She often visited her favorite cafe near the marina, where the staff knew her by name. It was her thinking spot. She'd bring her notebook and jot down ideas for future projects or reflections from her travels. Sometimes she'd write about that day at the resort, not as a wound but as a parable. It became her way of reminding herself how transformation often starts in silence. Other customers occasionally recognized her from interviews, offering words of admiration. Maya accepted their kindness but never saw herself as famous, only as someone who learned the hard way. The years ahead unfolded with a steady rhythm. Her company grew internationally, opening branches in London and Sydney. She hired more women, especially those who had left difficult jobs or families. Her office culture felt different, gentle yet ambitious. Everyone was encouraged to rest as much as they worked. When journalists asked her about her success formula, she always said the same thing: dignity and discipline. That phrase became her company motto. It wasn't catchy, but it was real, and it reminded everyone why the company existed in the first place: to value people. Meanwhile, rumors continued about the Whitmore legacy fading. Their properties had changed hands, and new names took over the empire. Maya never felt satisfaction hearing it, only distance. The world had moved on, and so had she. Still, sometimes she saw echoes of them in clients or business contacts, people obsessed with image, blind to empathy. Instead of anger, she felt compassion. Those people hadn't learned what she had, that arrogance costs more than humility ever will. She understood now that letting go didn't erase the past, it simply placed it where it belonged, behind her. Her mentorship program expanded into a foundation supporting young women starting service-based businesses. The initiative offered grants, training, and emotional support. Maya spent time with participants, listening more than she spoke. She recognized herself in their struggles: the exhaustion, the doubt, the hunger to prove something. Each time she saw one of them succeed, she felt that same pride she'd felt when she took control of her own life. The foundation grew faster than expected, attracting attention from global organizations. Still, Maya stayed humble. Her satisfaction came not from numbers, but from transformation. At a charity gala, she crossed paths with a familiar face: Julia, Ethan's former ex. Julia had aged gracefully but carried the stiffness of someone still chasing relevance. She approached Maya cautiously, offering a polite greeting. Maya returned it with kindness, but no warmth. Julia mentioned hearing about her foundation and praised her success. There was no malice, just distance. When Julia walked away, Maya realized that she no longer felt any rivalry, no lingering resentment. Whatever past connected them had dissolved completely. Indifference, she learned, is often the truest sign of peace. As the years passed, Maya's achievements multiplied, but she rarely stopped to celebrate. She didn't need grand milestones anymore. Her happiness came from the ordinary, quiet mornings, meaningful work, and the freedom to choose her path. She had outgrown the noise that once defined her life. The world could chase chaos. She preferred calm. She realized that her story was never about revenge. It was about remembering her own worth when others tried to erase it. That understanding made every sunrise feel like a small, personal victory. She'd earned her calm by living through storms. Her business success allowed her to travel again, this time purely for pleasure. She visited places she had only ever booked for others: Santorini, Kyoto, New Zealand. Each trip taught her something new about stillness and self-awareness. She would sit in small cafes or walk through quiet markets, absorbing the world without agenda. People often asked if she was ever lonely traveling alone. She always said no. Solitude wasn't emptiness. It was space to breathe, think, and exist without expectations. The same quiet she once feared had become her favorite companion. One afternoon in Italy, she visited a seaside village where locals recognized her from the magazine feature. A woman approached her and said her story had helped her leave an unhealthy job. The woman's husband, standing beside her, thanked Maya for saving his wife's confidence. Maya felt humbled. It struck her how far-reaching a single act of self-respect could become. The ripple effect of her decision had touched strangers she'd never meet again. In that moment, she realized she hadn't just rebuilt her life. She had quietly changed the lives of others, too. She started keeping a list of names of people she'd met, who told her she inspired them. It wasn't about pride. It was gratitude. Each name represented a reminder that the pain she once endured had turned into purpose. Her list grew longer with every year. Sometimes she reread it on quiet nights, feeling an overwhelming sense of contentment. Pain, when faced with grace, can become something beautiful. It doesn't erase scars, but it turns them into strength. She smiled, knowing that her story, born from humiliation, had evolved into something deeply meaningful. Eventually, she was invited to give a keynote address at an international business conference. The theme was resilience through adversity. Standing before a crowd of thousands, Maya spoke from the heart. She told them that real strength isn't loud, it's consistent. She explained that grace under pressure is more powerful than anger, and that boundaries are not walls but doors to self-respect. The applause was thunderous, but what mattered to her was the quiet understanding on people's faces. For the first time, she realized that her story had become something universal, a blueprint for dignity. After the speech, a young woman approached her backstage in tears, thanking her for the courage to leave a toxic job. Maya hugged her, whispering words of encouragement. It reminded her of herself years ago, standing in that resort lobby, trembling inside but refusing to show it. She had been that woman once, unsure, dismissed, small. Now she was the one giving others the courage to take their first steps toward freedom. The cycle of silence had broken, replaced by something far stronger, the shared language of quiet, steady self-belief. Her foundation gained global recognition after that conference. Donations poured in, and mentorship requests doubled. Maya expanded her team, ensuring the work continued without losing its personal touch. She refused to turn it into another faceless enterprise. Each story mattered. Each woman mattered. The more she gave, the more she healed parts of herself she hadn't realized still needed care. Success didn't feel like a finish line anymore. It felt like harmony. She had balanced ambition with empathy, leadership with humility. The foundation became her proudest creation, far beyond any business achievement. Years later, during a reflective moment, Maya decided to revisit the old resort one last time. Not for work, not for closure, just curiosity. She booked her stay under her own name. No agency title, no VIP treatment. The same palm trees lined the path. The same ocean breeze greeted her. The manager, now new, had no idea who she was. She smiled at the anonymity. Walking through the lobby, she noticed a plaque listing long-term collaborators. Her company's old name was still there. It felt strange but satisfying, like a quiet echo from another life. When she reached the elevators, she paused. The polished doors reflected her image, calm, confident, self-assured. For a brief second, she saw her younger self standing beside her, suitcase in hand, unsure but determined. The two versions of herself felt like reflections meeting halfway through time. She pressed the button for the top floor and rode up, not down. The soft hum of the elevator reminded her of that pivotal moment, years ago. When the doors opened to a sunlit hallway overlooking the sea, she stepped out smiling. It felt like rewriting her own story. That evening, she walked along the beach where everything began. The air was warm, and the horizon stretched endlessly. She thought about how her life had come full circle, how her greatest humiliation had become her foundation for peace. The sea had been both witness and teacher. She understood now that life doesn't always grant justice immediately, but it does reward clarity. Her power had never been in punishing others. It was in choosing herself. That realization made the world around her feel wide open, filled with endless possibilities and calm certainty. As the night deepened, the resort lights shimmered across the water. Maya stood barefoot in the sand, letting the waves wash over her feet. She whispered a quiet thank you to the universe, not for revenge or validation, but for growth. The basement room had once represented her invisibility. Now it symbolized her awakening. She had turned humiliation into grace, betrayal into wisdom. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about her journey from silence to self-respect, from confinement to freedom. That peace filled her like a tide that would never recede. Back in her suite, she opened her notebook, the same one she carried everywhere. She flipped to the last page, where she'd written, "I deserve rooms with windows." Beneath it, she added one final note, "And I will never accept less again." She closed the notebook and set it by her bed, the moonlight spilling across the cover. That sentence, so simple and quiet, carried every lesson she had learned. It wasn't about luxury or pride. It was about worth, knowing it, claiming it, and never letting anyone take it away again. The next morning, she watched the sunrise from her balcony, the ocean glowing gold under the light. She didn't take pictures or make posts about it. Some moments were too pure to share. She sipped her coffee slowly, thinking about how far she'd come from the woman who once accepted less to keep peace. This peace felt earned, real, and lasting. She realized that sometimes the best revenge is not a grand gesture but quiet happiness that needs no explanation. That realization made her smile softly as the day began. Later that day, she checked out of the resort, thanked the staff warmly, and walked toward the taxi stand. The driver asked how her stay was, and she replied simply that it was beautiful, and it truly was. Not because of the luxury, but because she had arrived as herself, whole and unafraid. As the car drove away, the resort faded from view. She didn't look back. Her story had started there, but it no longer defined her. She had built something greater than success, a life filled with dignity, calm, and self-worth. When Maya returned home, the city skyline greeted her like an old friend. The hum of traffic, the smell of salt from the bay, and the sight of her office building reminded her how far she had come. Inside, her team was preparing a new campaign, and laughter filled the air. She paused at the door for a moment, soaking it in. This was what rebuilding looked like: ordinary, calm, and alive. The chaos that once ruled her life had faded into background noise, replaced by quiet success born from steady, unwavering self-belief. Her desk held a small stack of thank you notes from clients and students she had mentored. Each one carried a story of transformation, courage, and independence. Maya read a few and smiled, realizing how her own story had become a guiding light for others. She never set out to be a role model, yet here she was, proof that grace could be power, that silence could be strength. The woman who once felt invisible now existed in countless lives as a symbol of calm resilience, her influence reaching far beyond anything she ever imagined. Later that week, she attended a small dinner hosted by her closest friends. It wasn't extravagant, just good food, laughter, and genuine warmth. They toasted to her journey, not because of her success, but because of her peace. One of them said she was the calmest person they knew, and Maya laughed softly, knowing how hard she had fought to earn that serenity. She realized that real wealth wasn't measured in money or accolades, but in how light her heart felt. That dinner, filled with love and friendship, meant more than any award ever could. At home afterward, she took a walk along the pier near her apartment. The air was cool, the water still. She leaned against the railing and watched the city lights shimmer on the surface. Each reflection felt like a memory, some bright, some dim, all part of her story. She thought of the girl who once believed tolerance was strength, and the woman who had since learned that boundaries were stronger. The night was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full, like peace had finally anchored itself inside her for good. Months later, her foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary. The event was modest but heartfelt, hosted in a sunlit hall overlooking the harbor. Dozens of women who had benefited from the program shared their stories, some tearful, some triumphant. Maya listened quietly, humbled. Each story was different, yet all shared one theme: rediscovered worth. When she finally spoke, she told them they didn't need to be loud to be powerful. Their quiet persistence was enough. The applause that followed wasn't just for her. It was for every woman in the room who had refused to stay small. After the celebration ended, Maya stood alone by the windows, watching the sunset reflect across the harbor. The golden light filled the room, warm and forgiving. She thought about her mother-in-law, about Ethan, and about the people who once looked through her. For the first time, she felt nothing but neutrality. Their shadows no longer touched her life. Time had turned bitterness into understanding. Everyone has a lesson to teach, even those who hurt us. Vivian had taught her one: never measure your worth through someone else's comfort. It was a lesson that had shaped her forever. She decided to write her story down, not for publication, but for herself. Late at night, she opened her laptop and began typing. The words came easily, not bitter or vengeful but reflective. She wrote about how control isn't power, how forgiveness is not forgetting, and how dignity can outlast humiliation. She wrote it as a letter to her younger self, the one standing in that elevator, holding a key to a basement room. The letter ended simply: "You were never beneath them. You were just waiting to remember who you were." When she finished, She printed the letter and placed it in a small wooden box on her bookshelf. Inside that box, she kept small tokens from her past: her first business card, the old company logo, and a faded resort brochure. These weren't reminders of failure, but of survival. They told the story of how a single act of courage could change the entire course of a life. She closed the box gently, knowing she would never need to open it again. The past had been honored, learned from, and finally laid to rest. Her life continued in rhythm, balanced and full. Her days were structured yet flexible, her nights restful. She had learned to say no without guilt, and yes without fear. That freedom made every part of her life lighter. She started painting in her free time, something she hadn't done since college. The canvases weren't masterpieces, but they reflected peace: soft blues, gentle horizons, and open skies. When guests visited, they often pointed to the paintings and said they felt calm just looking at them. Maya would smile, knowing that was exactly how she felt creating them. One afternoon, she received a message from a former client inviting her to plan an exclusive event at a new Caribbean resort. The irony made her laugh quietly. Years ago, that request would have filled her with anxiety and need for approval. Now it simply felt like another job. She accepted only after ensuring the resort treated its staff well and upheld her agency's standards. The trip turned out beautifully, free of chaos or drama. When it ended, the staff thanked her for her kindness. She realized how different her presence felt now: peaceful, grounded, whole. While walking along the beach after that event, she noticed a young woman arguing on the phone nearby. The girl's voice trembled as she said, "I'm sorry, I'll fix it." Maya saw a reflection of her younger self in that posture, the exhaustion of trying too hard to please everyone. After the call ended, Maya approached gently and offered a few calm words about knowing her worth. The woman looked surprised but grateful. It reminded Maya how every generation needs someone to tell them they're enough. She promised herself to always be that reminder. When she returned home, she added a new principle to her foundation's charter: emotional education. The program would teach communication, confidence, and boundary setting, especially for young women in professional fields. She believed success should begin with self-respect, not ambition alone. The first workshop filled within hours of announcement. As she watched the participants interact, she saw sparks of confidence forming in their voices. Maya realized she was no longer just teaching travel management, she was teaching life management. It was the most meaningful work she had ever done, and she felt proud. Years continued passing, and with them came a quiet stability that once seemed impossible. Maya grew older, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes softer but wiser. Her company ran smoothly under a trusted team, allowing her more time to mentor, travel, and rest. The storms of her past had long settled, leaving clear skies behind. She often thought that peace wasn't something you stumbled upon, it was something you built, layer by layer, decision by decision. She had built hers carefully, and it had become unshakable, even in the face of life's small challenges. On her 60th birthday, her friends organized a surprise dinner by the bay. The evening was filled with laughter, music, and old memories. When they raised a toast, one friend mentioned how inspiring her journey had been. Maya smiled, but said little. The real celebration, she thought, wasn't the party. It was the life she had built after everything collapsed. She looked around the table, surrounded by people who truly cared for her, and felt something deeper than joy. It was gratitude, pure and simple. Gratitude for every detour that led her here. After the guests left, she stayed outside, watching the reflection of city lights dance on the water. She realized that peace didn't mean the absence of problems. It meant not being shaken by them. She had become that kind of person: steady, graceful, unbreakable. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was honest. She no longer lived to prove, perform, or please. She simply existed in balance with herself. That quiet balance, once unimaginable, now felt like her natural state. It was the calm ending she didn't know she'd been working toward all along. The following week, she was invited to speak at a university graduation. Standing before hundreds of students, she looked out at faces full of hope and uncertainty. She told them that success wasn't about climbing ladders, but about building foundations that couldn't be shaken. She told them that respect wasn't something to chase, but something to protect. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was heartfelt. As she stepped off stage, a few students thanked her with tears in their eyes. She realized her story had become more than personal. It was now generational wisdom. In the years that followed, she traveled less, choosing to spend more time at home by the sea. She enjoyed the slower pace, morning walks, gardening, and reading. Sometimes, she caught herself staring out the window for long minutes, simply appreciating quiet. The noise of ambition had finally faded. What remained was presence. Her peace had no audience, no purpose beyond itself. She had become the kind of person she once envied, content without needing anything more. The woman who once lived to fix everyone else now lived simply to be, and that was enough. Every once in a while, she received letters from people she had helped over the years. Some were now business owners, others teachers or travelers. They all said the same thing. Her calm advice had changed their lives. Maya kept those letters in a glass box on her desk, not as trophies but as reminders of connection. They represented what she valued most: impact through kindness. The woman who once fought for recognition had become a quiet architect of other people's confidence. Influence, she learned, didn't always need to shout. Sometimes it whispered and still echoed far. One rainy evening, Maya lit a candle and sat by the window, watching drops trail down the glass. The sound was soothing, the air cool. She thought about her younger self again, the woman who walked into that basement hallway years ago, unsure yet resolute. She whispered a silent thank you to that version of herself for being brave enough to turn around. Every good thing in her life had stemmed from that choice. The candle flickered softly, and she smiled, realizing she no longer needed closure. She had already written her own ending. The next morning, she received an email from a journalist writing a book about women who built themselves from nothing. They wanted to include her story. Maya declined politely, suggesting others instead. She didn't want her life to become a headline. It wasn't a tale of revenge or scandal. It was a lesson in boundaries and renewal. She had already told her story to those who needed it. Beyond that, she wanted to live quietly, enjoying the life she had built. Fame, she knew, could never match the comfort of real peace. Her health remained strong, and her days simple. She spent mornings tending to her small garden, afternoons reading by the sea. Visitors often commented on her calmness, saying her home felt peaceful the moment they entered. Maya smiled, knowing it was because she had filled it with intention. Every plant, every color, every piece of art reflected tranquility. Her home was a reflection of her inner world, steady, uncluttered, kind. She had learned that peace wasn't found, it was designed. She had spent her life designing it, one small decision at a time. On her final visit to the island, years later, she stayed at a different resort. She walked along the beach one evening and saw the old resort in the distance. It stood silent under the fading light, now managed by another company. It looked smaller than she remembered, almost unremarkable. Maya felt no emotion, only calm understanding. Life had moved forward, and so had she. She turned away, feeling grateful that her journey had led her not back to that place, but beyond it, to a horizon of her own making. She spent her last night on the island, sitting by a bonfire, surrounded by new friends from the resort. They shared stories, laughter, and music under the stars. When someone asked about her past, she said only that life had once given her a hard lesson that became her greatest gift. Everyone nodded, sensing the depth behind her words, but not pressing further. Some stories, she thought, were meant to live quietly in the heart, not the spotlight. The fire crackled softly, its glow reflecting the peace she now carried within. The next morning, she watched the sunrise for the last time from her balcony. The ocean shimmered in soft gold, waves rolling gently toward the shore. She closed her eyes and whispered a simple thank you, to life, to time, and to herself. She had found meaning not in perfection, but in perseverance. The basement room that once symbolized shame had become her metaphor for rebirth. It had shown her that being placed beneath others doesn't mean you belong there. Rising again was always an option, and she had chosen it. That choice defined everything. As her story reached its quiet conclusion, Maya sat at her desk one final time, journaling her thoughts. She wrote that true freedom begins when you stop living through the approval of others. She ended with one last line. The basement room taught me who I was to them, but more importantly, who I would never be again. She closed the notebook gently, a peaceful smile on her face. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Honest, hard-earned, and full of light. And that, she knew, was the only ending that truly mattered.